Welcome to the 2022 Candidates Debate, moderated by the nonpartisan League of Women Voters of New Canaan. Candidates, thank you for being here tonight. We are grateful to Town Hall for allowing us to use this space and to NCTV Channel 79 for their production of the debate. Voters, we know your time is precious, so this year we are hosting 5 separate debates so you can watch only the races applicable to you. A reminder that edited or partial usage of tonight's program is not permitted. For the first time at one of our debates, we are excited to welcome a select group of seniors from the New Canaan High School debate team. They got to meet our candidates earlier and will be presenting the debate questions throughout the evening. It is heartwarming to know that when asked, these students enthusiastically raised their hands and were excited about participating in our democracy. Our hope is that by having these students here, more citizens, both young, old, and in between, will tune in, get informed, and vote. Questions for tonight's debate were submitted to the League from the public in advance. I want to thank everyone who took the time to let us know the issues they cared about most this election. In accordance with our nonpartisan guidelines, our carefully selected team reviews the questions and often rewrites them for comprehensiveness, fairness, nonpartisanship, applicability to all candidates, and relevance to the office. The candidates have all agreed to a set of debate rules for the evening. While our students will present the questions, I will remain here and be responsible for enforcing the rules, including time limitations. But I don't think it will come to that. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Sawyer from the New Canaan High School debate team, who will ask the questions for this debate.
Welcome to the candidate debate for Representative District 42, serving voters in parts of New Canaan, Richfield, and Wilton. Our candidates are Keith Denning and Kim Healy. The debate will begin with opening statements, followed by questions submitted by the public. Candidates will be allowed a 1.5-minute response, followed by an additional 30-second rebuttal. We will end with closing statements. Based on random draw, we begin with opening remarks from Keith Denning.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters in the town of New Canaan for hosting this debate. Since March of this year, I've been talking to people in the newly created 42nd State House District, asking them what concerns them the most about the state and the country. I heard many answers: the economy, schools, taxes, inflation, the reversal of Roe, vaccine and mask mandates, commuting, and the defense of our democracy have all been topics that are important to the voters. I want the people in the district to know that I have listened and that I heard. Tonight you get to hear from me. Voters will be given the chance to hear what my challenger and I have to say about important issues and what thoughts are important to issues in the state. It is the voters' opportunity to note our similarities and, more important, our differences. Just as you, I also have questions for my challenger. Does she admit that the President Biden was legitimately elected the President of the United States without widespread voter fraud? Was the attack on the Capitol an insurrection, or was it just, as quoted, acceptable political debate? And does a woman have a fundamental right to control her body and her health care, including her reproductive health care?
Kim Healy, it's now your turn.
Okay. So thank you all for having me here today, League of Women Voters, and to you, those watching from home. My name is Kim Healy. My husband and I moved to Connecticut in 1994, and when our family outgrew our first home, we moved to Wilton in 2008. I am a wife, a mother of 4 wonderful children, ages 25 to 16. We also have 2 dogs and a cat, busy household. I am a CPA, a trained accountant, and I was an auditor with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I am currently Wilton's Select Woman, co-chair of Minx to Sinks, and I'm an appointed member of the Connecticut Reading Leadership Implementation Council. I'm also a volunteer tax preparer through the AARP, serving retired and low-income individuals and families. Previously, I've served on Wilton Conservation Commission, and I was the treasurer of the Wilton Library Board. I have been honored to serve my community in these and many other capacities. I look forward to the questions tonight.
Okay, thank you. Now we will start with the first question. 30 years after Stature 830G on affordable housing was enacted, less than a quarter of Connecticut towns meet the target of having 10% of housing stock deemed affordable. What do you think are reasonable affordable housing goals for Connecticut, and how would you achieve them? Keith Denning?
Thank you for the question. First of all, 830G does not require 10% all towns have, or towns have 10% of affordable housing. That's one of the guidelines the state wrote into the law that said if you don't have it, you must fall under that particular rule. We have a housing crisis here in Connecticut. We have the first things people complain to me about are high taxes, and they want more businesses to come back. And ASML is coming with a $200 million advancement in development in Wilton. They want to bring in 1,000 new people to work there. Where are these people going to live? It costs a lot of money to rent a home, to buy a home, to pay your property taxes in this part of Connecticut and in most parts along the coastal Connecticut. And these people want to live where they work. I think 830G has failed in its objective. If it had worked, we would have had plenty of affordable housing by now. What is not working, though, is the state's management of finding housing for people in areas where they want to live and where they want to work. We need to find solutions where towns can work with developers to build housing that people can afford, and that the towns will welcome those people into their communities.
Kim Healy?
Sure. So I would, just agree with Keith that Connecticut 830G is, it allows for developers to override local planning and zoning if the community does not have 10% of, according to state law, affordable housing in its town. It was passed 30 years ago, and almost everyone agrees that it has failed in its objective, though the majority party in our state refuses to amend or repeal it. I was an active member of Connecticut 169 Strong, who held rallies and informative forums all over Connecticut to let people know what the legislation was to actually push through even more affordable housing last session. When it comes to affordable housing, the way that the criteria are presently, there has to be, this stinks. All right, hold on, let me think. It has to be deed restricted is one of the criteria. And one of the things that I know that we're doing back in Wilton is we are evaluating our housing stock to see which also homes would fit into the affordable except without the deed restriction. And therefore, we would have a better feeling of how affordable our towns already are outside of the 830G rule.
Right, and now, Keith Dunning, you can start with your rebuttal.
I think it's important for my challenger to admit that we have a housing shortage and approximately 100,000 units in the state. Our governor tells us that he wants to bring new companies in, and when new companies come in, we don't even have a place for the companies to locate, much less the people where they're going to live. Until we get serious about figuring out where we're going to welcome people into our communities and find them places where they can live, we're not going to address our tax situation or our economy seriously.
Kim Healy?
Oh, good. All right. So what I would say is that we have a lot of housing being built right on the border, say, of Wilton, right in Norwalk, which would be considered more affordable than what we have in Wilton. We have developments happening in Wilton that were approved and went through our local process in Wilton, which, and then you have New Canaan where you have, oh my gosh, am I done? Oh, sorry. Weed Street, which again is not being decided locally. They're trying to have state rules decide.
All right, now on to question 2. All states need revenue to provide services. What would you change about the ways Connecticut generates its revenue or how it spends it? Kim Healy?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. All states need revenue to provide services. What would you change about the ways Connecticut generates its revenue or how it spends it?
Well, we generate most of our revenue through income tax. We are the second highest taxed state in the United States. So I would like to actually see us have lower revenue streams coming into the state, and we should really be looking at the way we create our budget and do our expenses. The way it's done now, we calculate our appropriations first and then back into the revenue sources. So I would rather us review how that is done before we try to come up with any new revenue sources.
Keith Denning, your turn.
Thank you. Yes, we are highly taxed, and the majority of our taxes are property taxes, which are not taxed by the state. These are levied by our towns. That 90% of it goes towards funding our schools, another 5% towards our police, our fire departments, and our infrastructure at the local level. And yes, it's expensive to live here because our property is expensive. There's many people living on 2 and 3 acre lots. So if these lots are that large and you want to decrease your taxes, the only way to do that is to invite more people into your town. It's simple math. What we have to look at as far as taxes we could cut, yeah, I'd love to have a lower state income tax. It's right now, I think we should be more comparable with where we are with Massachusetts. I don't like the car tax, but that's, again, money that is deposited directly into the town's coffers. And this is money that is probably the most regressive tax that we have. I also don't like the way that we raise money on what I call the walking down the street, talking down the street, going to a theater tax. I think we're actually being fairly fiscally prudent right now with the way our government is managing our debt. We've paid down over $6 billion on our pension fund, and we're saving money.
Kim Healy, your turn for your rebuttal.
There's not a lot to rebut except to say that when Lamont came into office, he did a review of all of our programs and services. There was $80 million of easy cuts that could have been implemented. They have yet to be implemented.
Keith Denning.
I would love to have you elaborate on any of those 80 million easy cuts. I don't think there's any easy cuts in any time that you're talking about governmental work. It's always going to affect someone. I think what we've done is refilling the rainy day fund instead of giving all the money and giving a $650 million tax cut to the middle class as well as property tax cuts. I think this governor's done a great job. I want to continue to do it, pay down our debt, use our money wisely.
Okay, perfect. On to question 3. Connecticut is one of the few states that does not allow no excuse early voting, and our legislator cannot consider early voting measures without a change to our Constitution. The November 8th ballot will ask voters if they approve such a change to our state constitution. Many voters want to know if they vote yes, what early voting measures a candidate will support. What is your position on early voting, and if elected, what specific early voting measures would you support? Keith Denning.
The answer is yes. Early voting, more people who vote in a democracy, the better off we are with getting people's opinions and representation. I'm for a wide variety of early voting options as far as days of week, days or times of the week, as long as we're considerate of the cost burden that this puts on many of the towns. I know that Stephanie Thomas, running for Secretary of the State, is considering resolving this issue, and she wants to look at what's going on nationwide. We're only one of 4 states not currently offering early voting, and I think we can learn a lot from those who've already adopted it, and I suggest that we do so and hope that you all support this measure on the ballot.
Kim Healy.
I also agree that we should have some form of early voting. It is, I believe, safer. I would like to see it potentially offered, say, on the Saturday before Election Day, if Election Day could not become a holiday, which I think would be a better solution. But, living in this area and being a commuter to New York, there have been times when, for some reason, you can't get home to vote. It would have been easier to plan ahead the previous weekend to vote. I am really concerned about the cost to implement extended voting if it is done much more than, say, a day or two in advance of our current election day. We would need to ensure that we have really strict regulations surrounding security of the ballots and signature verification, and would want to see and get a lot of input from the residents of Connecticut and see what their feelings are about this.
Keith Denning, your rebuttal.
No rebuttal, thank you.
Kim Healy, anything to?
No, thank you.
Okay, on to question 4. Connecticut recently enacted legislation to protect the rights of persons both receiving and providing reproductive health care services, and to codify access to more reproductive health care service providers. Do you support Connecticut's current position, and why? Or what changes, if any, would you recommend? Kim Healy?
I'm just going to assume that was like a general women's rights question. Would that be correct? So Connecticut passed the Freedom of Choice Act in 1990 with 100% of the state Senate and 87% of the state House in favor. The law allows for abortions up to 26 weeks and in the third trimester only to preserve the life or health of the mother. There is no minimum age in Connecticut to have an abortion and no requirements that anyone is notified or provide consent for a minor child seeking an abortion. I am a pro-choice candidate. I believe that women must be able to make all health care decisions on their own and in private with their doctors. Government must never interfere with anyone's medical or health decisions. I think you're going to see a lot of national rhetoric around this issue, and in this race, I don't see it being relevant.
Keith Denning?
I think the word national rhetoric is a weakness when we recognize that the Supreme Court actually overturned a 50-year-old law that was established rule of law. And for somebody who represents precedents, or they're supposed to recognize precedents, we are not safe from the Republican Party on Roe or any other state-level issue. The Republican National Party has an agenda that they plan on running through the states, and while everyone can say that they are for choice, where are you really going to support choice? Are you going to make sure that Medicaid is covering it if Medicare doesn't, or if insurance doesn't cover it? And how restrictive are you going to be? Is this something that a doctor and his patient are going to have complete and total control over? I actually have been involved in the procedure of abortion in my healthcare practice. It is never a situation that is easy. It is never a situation that does not have tears and suffering involved on all parties. I don't think you can take this position of anyone but a Democrat who says that they are pro-choice in all circumstances.
Kim Healy, your rebuttal?
You know, they said don't make facial expressions or comments when other people are speaking. You realize you will be elected to represent Republicans. Is that something you're not really aware of? Do you not care that you have just basically insulted every Republican
Sorry,
that lives in this area?
we're not supposed to be communicating with each other, just.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really all I need to say.
Keith Denning, your rebuttal?
I don't think I've insulted any Republican. I think I basically insulted anybody who supports a Republican National Committee that has made it their national agenda for over 50 years to repeal Roe v. Wade. And now that it is done, they have come out again and said that their next objective is to codify it on a federal level. This is not idle threats, people. When people say they're going to do something, you should listen to them.
Okay, on to question 5. Connecticut residents have faced increased energy costs and service disruptions. What legislation would you propose to improve our energy and resource infrastructure to ensure future access and affordability? Keith Denning?
Thank you. This is a great question because our current energy situation was an attempt to bring our electric rates down by opening up the electric markets so that we could buy from whoever was creating it at the cheapest cost. And this was back in the 90s when electricity was fluctuating pretty low. We should have learned from the 1970s when I was a very young man at the time, and when we first had our Arab oil embargoes. And I remember having long lines then for fuel and oil and really cold winters that were expensive and hard to manage. America has never gotten off the cocaine of oil or the heroin of fossil fuels. And we need to enact both nationally and on local levels anything we can do to move us towards renewable energy, solar, wind, especially off the sound, geothermal, and give tax credits that we can to get those people who cannot normally afford it, or when there are times for their oil burner to be replaced, they can make this conversion, and we can make it as quickly as possible to not only protect our environment, but also to get us energy independent from those who produce oil right now, which is primarily Russia.
Kim Healy, your turn.
Yeah. Okay. So, as you know, because you get your bills, we have the third highest electric rates in the U.S. Some of the factors of why Connecticut costs so much, we have the largest number of added fees to our Connecticut bills by our Connecticut government. I would like to see them pull them out and have those expenses run through our state general spending budget. And that's almost 20% of our bill is through public policy, which are hardship programs, energy efficiency programs, certain environmental goals, which require zero carbon energy programs, and they cost more. And unfortunately, everything in our state costs more and is reflected in our utility costs. Salaries, land costs, repair costs, taxes, all of that gets passed on to us, the ratepayer. 40% of our electricity comes from the Millstone nuclear power plant, and that was almost closed. It was saved by Republicans pushing to keep it open. And without it, we would be paying even higher rates as natural gas must be brought in through outdated infrastructure pipelines. I do believe that we need to have a balance of where our energy comes from, green, gas, nuclear, but we must keep costs down. We have the highest rates in the U.S., and it is unfair to the residents of our state. Something that we should be doing as well is we should be having PURA, which we all learned about after the hurricane of 2020, and we should make that an independent of any government influence. Thank you.
Keith Denning, your rebuttal.
So I would like to thank the Republicans who kept the nuclear power plant open. That may be the only thing I thank them for tonight. But you're right, we need to keep in mind all forms of energy. All of the bills that you're talking about in fees are bills that are to help us transition away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy, as well as mitigate climate change. I'm not sure we need to give up those fees. The faster we get off oil, the faster we get off coal, the better we are.
Kim Healy?
I just would argue that we need to have a balance because the few things that you have mentioned how much do you expect the people to pay?
Okay, thank you. On to question 6. Other than reducing taxes, what ideas can you offer for Connecticut to attract new employers, retain jobs, and make Connecticut a more affordable place to live? Kim Healy?
We need to attack this from all sides. Our state has, like I've said earlier, I think we're the second highest tax state in the country. We have the highest land costs, the highest property taxes, like Keith had mentioned. There are things that we can do. I have signed on to a contract with Connecticut that the House Republicans will be pushing through regardless if I get elected or not in November. And some of the suggestions that are going to be put forth, and hopefully we'll get at least a hearing, would be to lower the income tax from 5% to 4% for families making less than $175,000 a year, to repeal the highway use tax on trucks that starts in 2023. And this was passed in 2021, and it will drive up the cost of food, consumer products, and services. To increase the property tax credit, which can be claimed for personal property and motor vehicles, to increase that from $300 to $500 for all families filing state income taxes. To reduce the sales tax and eliminate the 1% meals tax that was just implemented. And to repeal taxes and fees which cost more to collect than revenues they generate. Thanks.
Keith Denning?
I would agree that reducing some of the fees, they seem to be onerous on sometimes in Connecticut. However, think about what we get for our dollar. We pay high tax costs, but we have one of the highest highest educational services in our public schooling in the country. We have the best health care in the country. If we want to bring people to come and live here, it's housing. Our housing is outrageously expensive. We need to find a place where companies will come, find a workforce that's already being trained in our great schools and educational facilities, and find a place where they can live and get around faster. I propose we build an infrastructure for the 23rd century so that we can help those employees and employers match up so that inside the state, so they're not traveling back and forth to New York City, and we can actually move a workforce around to create an environment where you can live in Waterbury, you can live in Danbury, you can live in Bridgeport, and get to any job you want in the state. If we don't work on our housing and our infrastructure for transportation, we are never going to solve the problems that we have of the high cost of our land.
Kim Healy, your rebuttal?
Yeah, I would include we do need to work on our infrastructure, and we also need to really support our small businesses. There's something that I signed on, the CBIA Transform Connecticut Pledge, which will bring long-term solutions to our economic issues, with affordability, bringing jobs, and a more positive business climate.
Keith Denning?
I think we have a very positive business climate as it stands, and I would love to hear some of those specific ideas that you would use out of your plan.
We now invite our candidates to present their closing statements, starting with Keith Denning.
I believe that state government can be the breeding grounds for new and innovative ideas that can be models for the nation. They can also be breeding grounds for fear and extremism that will undermine our political system. At this time, there has never been a more stark contrast between the two major political parties. Democrats get things done. Democrats and Democrats alone pass bills that decrease gun violence, protected reproductive freedom, and demonstrated fiscal responsibility. Democrats and Democrats alone are there to find real solutions for families, seniors, small businesses, climate change, and affordability. I used to know I thought the Republican Party I thought I knew stood for less government, lower taxes, and a spending on the military. The Republican Party no longer represents those values. They've been corrupted by the far right, who reject basic democratic ideals, embrace the big lie, supported a violent and deadly overthrow of our nation's capital, and defend it as legitimate political discourse. Democrats are the party
Kim
of
Healy,
fiscal
your turn.
responsibility.
So thank you all for taking the time to watch tonight and hear us answer questions in our own voice. I've been out door knocking, trying to get to every door in the district. If you haven't seen me or my palm card at your door, I hope to get there very soon. This is what I will deliver to you as your representative: honesty, integrity, and hard work. I know these things matter, especially in this local race, perhaps now more than ever. And at the bottom line, for me, is that your government should work for you and not the other way around. I promise to listen to you. I will not prioritize my help based on your support of me or your political party. I will inform you on how I vote and why. And I will vote for what is in the best interests of New Canaan, Wilton, and Ridgefield, and to make Connecticut a state we are all proud to call home. The common thread for all these things we want for our families and for our community, and the things we can improve, is authentic leadership, not partisanship or rhetoric. I will work hard to change Connecticut so there's a better future for all of us, our families, and our children. Thank you so much.
This concludes our District 42 debate. We thank our candidates and our viewers for participating in democracy. Up next is Representative District 125, featuring Victor Alvarez and Tom O'Day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you again, candidates, for participating tonight. And thank you, Elizabeth Sawyer, for volunteering and being brave enough to ask the questions for us tonight. We hope, Elizabeth, that you are inspired to become a lifelong voter. Viewers, please be on the lookout for our nonpartisan voters guide, which should be in the mailboxes of each New Canaan resident soon. The voters guide is just one of the many activities the League does in New Canaan, including voter registration, sponsoring civics education in the schools, supporting internships and scholarships, and of course, running this debate. At a time when polarizing views and rhetoric can be the norm, it was wonderful to be here together tonight, hashing out issues in a civilized and thoughtful manner. Thank you.